Why come to church? Why take the time to come here to worship together? Can't we experience God at home or on a hike? After all, every confirmation class I have taught over the years, some bright kid in the room always knows to ask, if God is everywhere, why can't I just find God anywhere? And why do I have to come to this place to find God? Well, we all have our reasons for why we have come this morning. Maybe you came for the breakfast and you got your pancakes, but Sawyer's has pancakes every Sunday. They don't do it just once a month. They've got it all the time. Maybe you came because you enjoy the coffee after church, but to be honest with you, Flight Cafe up the street does not brew Maxwell House. Maybe you came for the awesome sermon or the spiritual formation, but I'm humble enough to tell you there are better preachers and teachers available on YouTube. You didn't have to come today. See, if this is all that happens for church, is nothing that we have a monopoly on. All of it you can find at least as good, if not better, somewhere else. So is there something that is happening here that isn't going to happen anywhere else? Some other thing we cannot get at Sawyer's or Flight or on YouTube? Because there are things, I believe, that happen here that can change us and change the world in a way that nothing else actually can. And so we all have our different reasons for getting up this morning and being here. But I want to look at one reason together as we dig into that marvelous reading from Revelation about what worship looks like with the saints and angels and all of the worship happening around the throne of God. And I also want to take a look at a hymn in our hymnal, because when we even look at it without the music, when we look at it with just the words of the poetry, it starts to point us in a direction for what is happening. And it's hymn number 24. I won't keep you in suspense. We don't sing it a lot on Sunday morning because it's actually a hymn for the evening. The day thou gavest, Lord, is ended, right, is the name of the hymn. They sang it at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth. It's a big one. The day thou gavest, Lord, is ended. The darkness falls at thy behest. To thee our morning hymns ascended, and thy praise shall sanctify our rest. Right? The hymn begins about talking about beginning and ending our day with prayer and worship. That we get up in the morning and we take to our rest, thanking God. It goes on to talk about the world turning from daylight and into night, and then from the darkness back into the day. The poetry sparks the imagination so that we can picture in our mind the round globe of the earth, either in the sun or in the shade. Right? It's 10 o'clock right now for our worship service, and we know that on the opposite side of the globe, it is night. We don't need a lot of imagination to remind ourselves that in 1 hour, it's going to be time for 10 o'clock church in the Central Time Zone. And they, in the Central Time Zone, are still having their pancakes and coffee while we are sitting here in our pew. And then sometime later, it'll be time for 10 o'clock church in California. And we are going to be well into our afternoon. And so when we were in bed in the middle of the night, we know there were people in Jerusalem and Rome and London, each of them already getting up and taking their turn to worship while we had our head on the pillow, hopefully. And so the hymn goes on, right? We thank thee that thy church unsleeping while the earth rolls onward into light. Through all the world her watch is keeping and never rests by day or night. As over every continent and island, the dawn leads on another day. The voice of prayer is never silent, nor dies the strain of praise away. See, the whole world gets its moment to worship. While some of us get the rest that we need, others are at prayer. And while we are here at prayer, others are getting the rest that they need. And so it goes, whatever keeps us up awake in the middle of the night, we know there is someone out there who's praying. We know that when we get up and to take our part here in the church, here on our Sunday worship, we know that someone somewhere on this earth is also in an act of worship and praise with us at every moment. So that's one good reason that we come here at a certain time on Sunday, because we take our part in the worship that goes on all over the globe. As the reading from Revelation says, the praise and worship comes from every nation, every tribe, every people, every language. It's a beautiful and poetic and a potent image for those of us who exist in space-time. As we, though, can also go further into that reading with Revelation, because as Christians, we know there are things in the cosmos, in the universe, that are not limited by space-time. That's why we have this Revelation story here and what it's showing us. Throughout the season of Easter, all of these weeks that we've had, we've been reading little snippets of the book of Revelation, particularly these stories where the figure of John gets called up into heaven and goes through a door called by a voice, and he gets a guided tour of what heaven looks like. Now, we don't really talk enough about what heaven looks like. But I think we probably should and spend at least a little time on this, because we all plan to spend eternity there. So we might as well know what we're going to get ourselves into. Right? So what does John see when he gets there? He wrote it down and told us what it's going to be like. He sees a great multitude of people robed in white, carrying victory branches in their hands, worshiping God. He sees angels and elders and these weird four living creatures that he says more about later on, all of them singing and worshiping. He sees the object of their worship, the Lamb, Jesus himself on the throne at the center. And so what happens in heaven is in eternity. It's detached from time. It can be hard to imagine for those of us who live in a world of time zones and clocks to capture what it's like for there only to be a now without a before or a later, and that it's just always kind of now. But as it is, there are no time zones in heaven, so you don't have to ask the question, when I call my mom later today, what time is it in California? And thanks be to God, because there's no time zones, there can be no jet lag in heaven. It just won't exist. But for this hour of worship, we actually, in this little slice of the earth, as it turns around the globe, we get to join ourselves to the cosmic worship that's going on in heaven all the time, in eternity. Every Sunday we come to this altar and we pray the great Thanksgiving prayer. We have words that are some version of "therefore we praise you, God," joining our voices with the angels and the archangels and all the company of heaven, the elders and the living beasts and the martyrs and the saints and all of them, who sing this hymn, "Holy, holy, holy," right? That for one moment, when we come to church, when we come to worship, we do something that we actually can't do really anywhere else in any other way. That ourselves, creatures who live in space-time, are elevated right up into eternity itself, where the saints and angels are always there. And so there's one more piece of John's guided tour of heaven that is good, because some people, for some people, knowing that heaven is like eternal worship is really good news, usually for churchy people and choir people. For some people, knowing that heaven is eternal worship is not the best news they've heard. It's usually the people who didn't want to get out of bed this morning, but that's fine. That's fine. There's more to the story. It's only about half of the reading. So here's the other part of this, of what we know will be in heaven, what we know and how heaven is going to be, that every time we are praying, right, that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, we should know what we're praying for. We're asking for it to be here on earth as it is in heaven. So John's going to tell us what it is it's like. What is it like? What are we asking for when we say, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven? So John shows us, first of all, we hinted at this before, diversity. It's essential he saw to have every nation, every tribe and people and language there. It was essential that they still have their language and their culture and their identity for who they are. They were not whitewashed into things that have no language or culture or identity. God loved the rich diversity of the human race so much, it's going to last forever in heaven. So we might want to get used to it now, first of all. We might be praying for that whenever we say those words, on earth as it is in heaven. John shows us the worship of the Lamb at the center of everything, that the center of worship is the meek and the vulnerable Lamb, Jesus, the crucified and resurrected one. Because down here in this world, the world might worship power and wealth, but not up there. So that might be one thing that we can pray for when we say on earth as it is in heaven. John shows us the martyrs, the saints who have endured the great ordeal, the people who suffered unjustly at the hands of powerful kings. And now those who suffered are at the center of everything, no longer on the margins, close to the throne, close to Jesus, the Lamb. And there's no more mention of the titles of earthly kings because there's only here a higher authority. John shows us God's shelter and protecting love. That up in heaven, he says at the end of that passage, there is no more hunger like we have down here. You know, I really do love the Goffstown Network food pantry, but I think it's excellent news that in heaven there will be no more need for food pantries. There will just be a world where they are not needed anymore. There will be more, as John says, no more striking sun and scorching heat. So I don't know what the climate change activists are going to do. There's going to be apparently no global warming in heaven either. Maybe those are things that we are praying for when we say, let it be on earth the way it is up in heaven. John shows us at last that there are no tears in heaven. Everything that causes our tears will be made whole. Whatever it is that keeps us up at night will no longer be allowed to cause worry and anxiety. What a marvelous vision of heaven and our hope for what God will do when God's will is done on earth. And that takes us to the last verse of the hymn. So I can go sit down. It's the end of the hymn. So be it, Lord, thy throne shall never, like earth's proud empires, pass away. Thy kingdom stands and grows forever, till all thy creatures own thy sway. And so that is what this hour of worship does. Why come to church? So that we can be not just taking our part in what is happening all around the globe, each in its own time zone, but that when we come to sing holy, 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 we are raised up and lifted up into heaven, just like John was, to see the angels and the archangels and the elders and the martyrs and the creatures and the Lamb on the throne in a vision of eternity, a vision of heaven that is a realm where all the diversity of humanity is honored. It is a world where there is the weak and the vulnerable are at the center of everything, not the rich and the powerful. Where there's a world where there is no more hunger, where there are no more tears. It's a vision that can change you just to see it, just to think of it. And that's why we need to come here, so that with all of the stuff that happens down here in this world, we get a chance to have that vision again and again, to be reminded of what we are going toward and where God is leading us. And that vision might just change you for the week to come. And then when we go out of here, before we come back again, if you have been changed by this vision through your faith, you might just change the whole world. Amen.